I spent 17 years in the city of Chicago, right? And there's a joke there. There are only two seasons, winter and construction season, right? The city's so snarled up and packed with public works that as a local taxpayer, it's impossible not to push yourself back from the table after paying your property tax bill and ask yourself, who is making these decisions? If you get to know some people in the construction industry and a few Chicago politicians, what you won't miss is that they're kind of the same people, right? Voting up big fat construction projects for themselves on your nickel, and that's life in the big city. So what if there were a better way? Our guest tonight is Ray Garfield, who many of you have met before. He's Naval Academy class of 1966. And Ray has a whole bunch of great stories. We've heard some of them, but this is just one of them, and it's kind of a doozy. About 25 years ago, right about the time I was graduating from the Naval Academy, Ray started to explore a really interesting question. What if there were a private marketplace to finance public works? In other words, what if there were a source of ready private financing for municipal construction projects, but one that provided the kind of due diligence and oversight that doesn't happen when a politician makes a backroom deal with his brother-in-law? Get that right and everybody wins, right? So Ray has 3 lessons to teach us tonight. One is about a really cool investment vehicle. Another is about the realities of local economics. But the third, and maybe the most important one, is how to take a really thorny problem that makes losers out of almost everybody and flip it around so that almost everybody wins. So that's super cool. Ray, thank you so much for joining us tonight and telling us your story. And sir, the floor is all yours.
Well, thanks, Jason. And nice to see everybody tonight. Our firm, which is called Garfield Public Private, is heavily real estate and finance and really problem solving. I established this firm in 1997. My son, Greg, joined me the following year. Once I figured out I'd have a source of revenue to pay him something. And frankly, I never liked nepotism, but it's really worked. He's kind of a younger and better looking and smarter version of myself. So he's really been instrumental in our growth. He's particularly one of the smartest guys in the country performing arts centers right now. But if you can take a little bit of step back in time, it might help you understand how a USNA graduate engineering student and then naval aviator ended up doing what I'm doing today. And I think Jason would probably like me to tell you that, again, my first couple of years out of the Navy, I got recruited by Ross Perot and EDS. I was actually one of the first 300 employees in his firm and one of several Naval Academy grads, including Ross. And at the time, his president of his company, Mitch Hart. So I had some supporters there. They really did have a penchant for hiring Academy graduates and veterans whenever they could. You know, I did leave EDS because frankly, they deployed me more than the Navy deployed me when I was flying. And I was a brand new husband with a little kid and another one on the way. So I thought the best thing for me to do was find something that would keep me home, closer to home. And in real estate, certainly at the time, was called a local business. So that sounded good to me. And then frankly, my first 8 years out of the Navy and EDS were spent in commercial real estate. I kind of honed my sales skills. I co-invested with friends and clients, and frankly, some Naval Academy graduates here in Dallas in some properties that I found. And then after 8 hard years of effort there, I got an offer to actually sell my company to Merrill Lynch at a time when Merrill Lynch was trying to be all things to all people. They were buying insurance companies, real estate companies, title companies, banks. And so we didn't pass up the opportunity. We sold. And then the next 4 years with Merrill Lynch, as you can imagine, our deal volume increased immensely, probably 5 times for the average size deal because it was called Merrill Lynch and not Garfield, which no one had ever heard of. And then our Dallas, Texas office became the leading producer in the nation of all of their commercial real estate groups. And I was offered a job in New York at a corporate level. And I moved there with my family. And And frankly, although the role was very filling, the politics of Merrill Lynch was not at all fulfilling. And so I jumped at an offer to move to a company called Salomon Brothers. And for those younger folks on this call, Salomon was an American multinational investment bank, and frankly, the most profitable firm on Wall Street during the 1980s when I was there. Our chairman was a guy named John Goodfriend, called the King of Wall Street. Books were written about Salomon Brothers, notably Liar's Poker by Michael Lewis. And I can tell you, you had to have swagger to be there. There was I think a part of the book where it said people didn't come at you with a hatchet from behind; they came at you from the front with the hatchet, and that's a lot the way it was. I'll clean this up, but the term "big swinging whatever" actually came out of Salomon to refer to bankers who dominated the game of huge profit making. And then the author Tom Wolfe was inspired to write Bonfire of the Vanities by stories that came out of Salomon Brothers. I worked in the commercial real estate mortgage securities division. It was founded by a guy named Lou Ranieri. And anybody that's been in the investment banking world will know that Lou Ranieri invented mortgage-backed securities, first residential mortgage-backed securities and then commercial mortgage-backed securities. And over time, though, the bastardization of Lou's invention ended up causing the housing crisis of 2007 and 2008. So suffice it to say that my years at Salomon Brothers sort of provided my PhD in finance in some great earning years, but I left Salomon Brothers thankfully prior to 1991, when the meltdown was caused by one bond trader whose nefarious actions created over $1 billion in fines and restitutions to Salomon Brothers, and the ultimate sale of that company to Travelers, which then became Citigroup. So in 1991, I was recruited to become the chairman and CEO of a bankrupt company called Vista Properties. It was a publicly traded firm. It emerged from the bankruptcy of a company called Lomas and Nettleton, which was the largest mortgage company in the United States, 75-year-old firm that went into Chapter 11 in 1989 and emerged in 1992. It was like a $3 billion bankruptcy at the time, one of the largest ever in the nation. And I mentioned this only to kind of fill the gap between my Salomon Brothers days, where I kind of really developed the financing techniques that we use today, and in the time I started my firm. But at Vista, we took a company that had about $1.2 billion in loss carry forwards and built-in losses on the books, and found a merger partner in our fourth year of operations, Syntex, which is the second largest home builder in America, and sold the company successfully to them. So in 1997, I found myself out of a job. When I went there, it was 92, and the adage around the country was stay alive until 95. And certainly we were helped by the recovery of the markets in our 1990s.
Ray, my classmates and I had the same adage, I believe.
Oh yeah, you would. Well, let me tell you something. It was if you're in the marketing industry, it was like holding on because I've been through several cycles. But in 1997. I'd been the chairman and CEO of a public company. I had a great restructure with that company. I certainly learned a lot about corporate restructuring and preservation of corporate tax losses and mergers and acquisitions, but during my time there. But then in 1997, things were so strong that every CEO in the country, whether they knew what they were doing or not, they were doing okay. So there was no other CEO position that I could find. So what did I do? I hung out my own shingle and started Garfield Corporation, which is now Garfield Public Private. And that first year was basically advising and consulting. I just called and signed up about 5 clients that year and advised and consulted and made some money. Actually officing right here in my home, out of a computer in an office space in the house. And one client, which turned out to be the largest general contractor in the nation, Turner Construction Company, hired me to sell a subsidiary that had really practically broken their back at the time. It was a development company called Turner Development, and it cost them hundreds of millions of dollars in losses. And so we successfully sold Turner Development Company at the end of 1997, and I was invited up to New York and patted on the head, and they said, "Nice job. And by the way, we got a new idea." So they essentially signed a contract with me for 4 years to lead trying to win design build projects around the nation, but only with public projects, because Turner was the largest builder in the nation, and they were building these skyscrapers all over the country for some of the largest names in the country, huge developers that you all would know. And they didn't want to favor a small no-name company named Garfield, so we picked the public sector because private developers hadn't worked in the public sector before. Main reason is you really don't get to own anything. And if I build a courthouse or a prison or a performing arts center or a convention center or school, I'm not going to own it. And these huge developers had built their fortunes owning properties. So we set out to figure out how to win public deals for this huge construction company. And so 97 was that first year. I went to New York. I started learning about design build, which was really brand new at that time. They had done 4 design build deals at that moment in time in their entire company, which did about 10 billion a year in construction. It was a new innovation. The old way of winning deals in the public sector is that if you're a city, you're a county, you're a state agency, you're a university, you're a K through 12 school system, you hired an architect. The architect drew all of your plans completely, all through concept designs and schematic designs and design documents and then construction documents. And then they put those construction documents fully completed out to bid to contractors who'd never seen them before. And then you had to pick the lowest bidder. So the lowest bidder was stuck with plans that he didn't help draw, that had errors in them because there was no input from the builders who were going to actually install the foundations and the entire facility. So there were tons of errors in these plans all the time. And in the way they described it to me in my first few days at Turner was the program was design, bid, build, litigate, and occupy. So when I heard the word litigate, I thought, well, that's an interesting problem. And you'd like to eliminate that if you could. And then all the errors that you'd find when you're building the property prompted change orders and schedule delays. And so nothing came in on time and on budget. And nothing really came in a quality fashion either, for that matter. So contractors didn't want to take liability for their projects unless they control the designs too, the architects. And that was what design build is. The designer has to work under a contract with the contractor, and the contractor has that responsibility for making a lot of decisions. And that made a lot of sense to me. I thought I could sell that idea. And then the other part is the financing. And so public buildings are, to build one, you first put it forward to the voters. You all went to the voting polls 2 days ago. And there were probably some propositions by your school district or your city or county that you were asked to vote yes or no on, approve $1 billion in financing to build schools, $2 billion for whatever universities, et cetera. If the voters approved at 50.1% approval, then that entity can sell bonds called general obligation bonds, full faith and credit, They're the lowest possible interest rate because of that process. And on the same hand, if you have that bond issue and it's turned down, the voters deny it, then you can't issue general obligation bonds. And many public agencies are left scratching their heads going, how are we going to finance this building that we really need? And so that was my second major sort of aha moment. You know, I've got to figure out solutions to both of these issues. So necessity being the mother of invention, we had to figure out these other methodologies. So I was hatching, I thought, a really good plan. So fortunate to have the backing and support of the largest United States contractor with 44 offices, 250 business development managers around the country, all searching for new business. We were designated as the sole partner for design, build, finance programs around the nation. So what do? We sit back, let the phone ring, let the texts come in, the emails. And you can imagine it's pretty exciting, except that what happened? We got tons of calls from all over the country from business development guys with Turner saying, hey, I have a developer that can't get his financing. And if we can put up the financing at Turner, we'll get the construction job. So let me just tell you, if there's a developer that offers a contractor a potential job, if they can bring the capital, something's wrong with the deal, something that we can't correct or anyone else. So we spent much of '97 turning down a lot of these introductions. But we then quickly began to indoctrinate all these Turner operatives. And toward the end of 1998, we were an integral part of a 3-day national sales meeting with Turner, every office manager, every sales manager. And at the end of an hour-long presentation, I got cornered by the manager and the development business director of the Kansas City office. And they had $1 million of lost money in a pre-construction project for a hotel and convention center for Overland Park, Kansas. So if anybody from Kansas here, that was our first project. It had been awarded to a developer who couldn't finance it. That's when they lost the $1 million. So they came to me to say, hey, do you have any ideas on how we can recover this $1 million and build a $150 million project? And so with that introduction to Overland Park, we were able to ultimately be selected to be the developer with Turner as the general contractor. And we ended up building the Overland Park Sheraton and Convention Center there in Overland Park. And it did come in ahead of schedule. It came in almost $2 million under budget. Everybody was really pretty thrilled. And then about that same time, the Atlanta office of Turner called and said, hey, we're building a jail here and we're taking the city council and the judges and everybody out to see Atlanta Falcons games and Braves games. And the constant thing that we hear is that they need a new courthouse. So these judges that were in a 50-year-old courthouse with no security, no safety, very soon after the Murrah bombing in Oklahoma City, you all remember that, no matter how young you are, you had to hear about that and read about it. But they really needed a safe building. And but a bond referendum couldn't be brought to the voters for about 4 years. And then we had inflation in those days. That would have 4-year wait would have raised the price probably 30 to 40%. And so they were desperate to figure out a solution. They invited me to Atlanta, sat down with the judges, with the city manager, the chief financial officer, and in about a day determined that they had a revenue source from what's called fines and forfeitures there that they could easily use to actually offer as a rent payment to amortize a bond that they could sell to finance this new courthouse. And that's what we did. Without a public referendum, the city agreed to enter into a 25-year lease, annually appropriated lease, by the way. It's a nuance in the law where the voters don't have to approve it if there's not a 30-year full general obligation. And so with that 25-year annual appropriation, we were able to sell what's called a certificate of participation. certificate of obligation here in Texas. And we built this, this courthouse, one of the first public-private courthouses built in the nation. Again, delivering it under a design build contract with Turner, ahead of schedule and under budget. So, you know, kind of now a new business was born. And, you know, in each case, in each new development, in each competition, we had to figure out a new and different solution to solving the client's capital problems. And we did it step by step and client by client. So in Reno, Nevada, for example, we were presented with a capital structure that they had approved a voter referendum to build this facility, but also to handle flood control for the Truckee River. And then they immediately had a 200-year flood and wanted all the money to solve the flood problems. So we came up with a solution not to have another referendum, to let them lease this property back. And we ended up building their public safety training campus using, again, certificates of participation. And about that same time, we were asked by Turner to go to Los Angeles to look at what was called the Bundle of Eight. The Los Angeles Unified School District, the second largest in the nation, needed to finance 8 schools. They wanted to do it privately because there were terrible laws in California requiring team after team to be scrutinized. Still, you had to hire the lowest bidder. No quality contractor wanted to work for them because they were so abused. So we were one of 6 finalists, and the only one of 6 finalists to propose a tax-exempt solution. They all wanted private delivery, and all the private developers were offering to go to Bank of America or Wells Fargo and borrow money, taxable, and pay those interest rates and build the schools. And we came up and said, well, you know, the school district can do better. They can agree to buy the properties when we complete them. And if they do that, Turner will guarantee to build them on time and on budget. And we can go to New York and get Standard & Poor's and Moody's to rate these bonds. So we were the low cost bidder from a finance standpoint, not from a construction standpoint. And we ended up building these 8 schools. I'll tell you that right after that, we did something very similar for New York State Department of Transportation building. Again, we were one of 6 finalists there. We were the only one that proposed a tax-exempt solution. And it was really a light bulb coming on for their controller in the state. He loved the process, and we built a LEED silver building for the state of New York when I think it was one of the first LEED buildings approved in the state of New York. So all of this time I'm in Los Angeles and New York and Kansas City and Reno and not in Texas. And why is that? Well, we just couldn't get hired because our name wasn't Trammell Crow or Gerald Hines or Ray Hunt or all these legendary Texas developers. How does a firm named Garfield compete in a state that it actually home ports in, but no one's heard of you? So we literally had to go across the Red River to be considered an expert from afar. You know, you're just never an oracle in your own city, in your own land. So it took us about 8 years of work to find our first deal in Texas. So in 2005 or 6, we were hired to do a headquarters hotel and convention center in Lubbock, Texas. We weren't the first developer. The first 2 couldn't do the deal. We were the third. We did the deal. And by the way, we're back in Lubbock completing a $150 million performing arts center right now called the Buddy Holly Hall of Performing Arts and Sciences. And we've just been hired by Lubbock County to build a new expo center to do equestrian events and so forth. I probably need to move my headquarters from Dallas to Lubbock. But it is, and now, by the way, we completed the Westin Hotel in Irving, Texas for their convention center last year. We're now designing 3 new hotel convention centers for 3 other Texas communities. So we're really engaged in about another $600 million here in Texas, which is great. All of that being said, bloodied, scarred, and not defeated, this public-private business is highly political. And in some cases, the deck is stacked against you. High profile defeats across the nation for us: Texas Southern University, Virginia Beach, Omaha, Nebraska, Columbia, South Carolina, Tucson, other places. Each venue we competed, we were selected. And then subsequent changes in the mayors, the city councils, the staff, they reversed their selection in favor of a favorite son who had actually not been selected in the original solicitation, but who later on lobbied to call in favors that they were owed. So it's often not a pretty business. You got to be prepared to lose hard-fought victories to get up and to fight again. And so this business is not for the faint of heart. And finally, I'd just say in opportunities, we've learned during our 24 years in business now that it's really important to provide a quick no answer to working on a deal when you really know it's going to be a losing cause. We feel we have to be introduced by a friend of the client. And so it's usually a general contractor, but it's often an architect that it's either building another building or designing another building. They're liked by that client. It's a consultant who's worked for the client. It's a property manager that they rely upon. It could be a financial advisor, municipal advisor, a bond counsel, an attorney who has the ear of that client, is a trusted leader in the community. And so if we can be introduced by sort of a warm introduction by these friends ahead of when a solicitation comes out to the mayor, the city manager, the university chancellor, the superintendent of the school district, any of these clients, that's our best option. And we just need more than a rumor or a newspaper article or even a published request for qualifications or request for proposals. We need to be ahead of the game and not behind in joining the fray. So our greatest allies are all of these organizations that I've just mentioned and anybody that would like to work with us. Matter of fact, one of my 2 Naval Academy roommates brought me the Bay City, Michigan Convention Center Hotel. And because he was a licensed appraiser within the state of Michigan, he earned a heck of a nice referral fee. One of my partners, a guy named Dan Hennessy out of the class of 63, by the way, formerly #1 in his class, and post his service in the Navy, was voted on the law review at Harvard. Great attorney. He's our general counsel and my partner. We value the strength and the mettle of service academy graduates and veterans, frankly, and would always lean that direction in building our company. So although right now we're, I guess, waiting until 2021 to have our next staff additions, and we need a couple of people badly, but we just want to keep our powder dry during COVID. We'd love any collaboration with this group or folks that you may know. So appreciate your listening to that and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great, thanks for that story, man. That is, I've got a whole list of them, and I get to jump in. So who are your investors? Did the bonds that you guys create, the instruments that you create, do they go out into the public markets? Are they sold to private investment houses? How does that work?
Well, I would say probably 4 out of 5 times they are the investors that Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, all the investment banks that work with us in marketing these bonds, go out and market those bonds too. We do have certain family trusts, for example, managers of trusts and everything that will come in. We financed our Westin Irving Hotel and Convention Center hotel, headquarters hotel, with such a group that actually purchased each of the different tranches of bonds that financed that hotel. The cities, by the way, if we do a public-private venture where these types of investments are available, Jason, it's typically a hotel. And right now, with COVID, very few people are staying at hotels and no one's going to meetings at convention centers. We believe that's going to come back, but probably not with any force until probably 2023 or 2024. But in those situations, the cities, and it's often a city, it could be an airport, a terminal hotel, it could be a big healthcare campus hotel and with extended stay and a meeting space for conferences. And it could be a university. You know, our Texas Tech, our Lubbock Hotel services Texas Tech University and collaborates with them in training their majors program in restaurant and hotel management. But the cities typically don't want to own 100% of. So if we're going to build, let's say, $100 million hotel, the city's going to put in 35 or 40 million itself. So the hotel.
That begs another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you've mentioned several of these now. So I've got the Overland Park, Sheraton and Convention Center, the Westin Hotel and Convention Center in Irving. So you've got the hotel name in it, right? So it sounds like a really sweet deal for the hotel owner to have the city build their hotel for them. Where's the threshold? When does this become a public project?
Well, there are tons of hotels in the country and tons of hotel developers. And so we're not competing with private developers. We're not going to build limited service hotels or select service hotels, as they're called nowadays, which don't have full service restaurants. It's like a Marriott Courtyard or a Hilton Garden Inn, or downhill from that, you're going to have Fairfield Inn or those things. They just have rooms, no meeting space to speak of, maybe one or two modules with 500 square feet of meeting space. The headquarters hotels for convention centers are full service hotels, like a Hyatt Regency or a Westin Hotel, okay? And those hotels cost at least $300,000 per room to design and build. So there's a rule of thumb that if you can get $300 a night average rate per room from a stayer, you could spend $300,000 a room to build that hotel with no public support. But even in New York City, where you might get $400 a night average or $500, it may cost you $1,000 a room to build in New York City. So for these headquarters hotels, one for a city, one for a university, one for an airport, one for a big hospital campus, we're going to build something that they really vitally need, a hotel that can have meetings. And because we're probably going to get, in Irving, for example, with the Westin, they only had about projected $220 a night average rate for this hotel. And it cost us $320,000 a key to design this hotel. So we needed about a third contribution from the city to make it work financially. We sold the 2/3 in private bonds to the private market. They put up a third, which we never have to pay back. They pay it as a city, because it is, again, a public-private partnership.
Now, you mentioned right back in the beginning, as you were sort of setting the stage for this, you mentioned a term that kind of made my hair stand on end. So let me preface this by asking, when you do the projects the way that you do them now, am I correct in assuming that the monies raised by the bond issue they can only be used on that project? Is that correct?
Yes.
So the term that you mentioned was general obligation bonds. and it sounds like before you guys came up with this, that a city would issue a bond to build, as you say, a convention center or something, and really be under no obligation to spend that money on the convention center. It sounds with a general obligation bond, it sounds like it just goes into the city coffers and they can do what they want.
Not really. If they put a proposition in front of the voters and the voters specifically approve $100 million to build this convention center, they have to spend that $100 million on.
They got to. Okay, so that wasn't the issue then.
And we never financed anything with a general obligation bond. Generally speaking, not that we wouldn't be a great developer for any city, even if they're trying to build something using their general obligation bonds, because they do need qualified leadership in designing and building a great building. But typically, if they've had their bond issue passed, they don't think they need a developer at all. They're just going to hire an architect and a contractor and get it done without a developer with their own staff. And it's going to be a mess. So
Well, excellent. I want to open the floor here for more questions. And by the way, we do have, let me throw an introduction in here while we're at it. So we have on the line Soti Koev, who is one of the Koev brothers. He was really one of the driving force behind the establishment of Ringknocker. He sent me my very first transition mentee. And Soti and his brother actually run a group of private investors, and I'm looking at his face and I can just see his wheels turning. So Soti, meet Ray. And yeah, I'm very curious to hear what's going on in your head, Soti, as you listen to this interesting story.
Yeah, this is really good stuff. I have extremely limited knowledge about public-private partnerships, so this has been extremely educational. I spend part of the day essentially thinking about how businesses work, how things actually happen, and actually see how these different businesses relate into the big picture. So, let's tell you a little bit about me, and then I can ask a question perhaps. So, working here with Jason to actually found Ringknocker has been amazing. I bring people all the time, so and they do enjoy it a lot. So my brother and I, we have a private investor group, and we're based in the Washington D.C. area. I just put in our website that I created recently, and so just to give you a little bit of a background, we have about 400 high net worth individuals that we do private deals with, and our concentration is in three different areas primarily. So private operating companies, that's your biopharmaceuticals, manufacturing, technology, fintech, things like that. Then we do commercial real estate. Now we're doing actually deals with two deals, multi-million dollar, with Naval Academy grads. So development and a essentially acquisition. And our last component is media. So we do music productions as well as movies. And a lot of people think, oh, you must be in finance. You just deal with the numbers. Very wrong. I know we actually create very amazing content, and we're going to be hiring people in the near future as operators. So that's really the next best thing, is to be a part of deals that are actually run by military veterans, especially academy grads. Most of my deals now are on the investor side, and on the entrepreneur side are with academy grads. And actually, one of them came from this room. So we met on Ringknocker. So so this is really about me. And now, just a quick question to Ray, and that is, how do you see the outlook of the public-private partnerships with this new world now of essentially businesses shutting down, conventions going down, essentially city budgets plummeting, tax revenue going down? How do you see essentially these things playing out into the future?
Well, Soti, as I said earlier, I've been at this business for a long time, and I've been through, I guess, 3 major turndowns. Nothing like this. No one's ever gone through anything like this since, I guess, about 1918. But I know enough. I broke ground on the Overland Park Convention Center, I guess in January of 2001, and then came 9/11, and this country shut down. No one was flying, as you know. No one was going to meetings or anything like that. We were all sheltered in place and wondering when the next attack was going to come. The 2007, 2008, for us, 2009, 2010 housing crisis, the thing that drove Lehman Brothers out of business and so many other major firms. I've been through that too. Right now we're close to maybe a year into this COVID. I have 3 major municipalities that have engaged us that are still paying to design these hotel and convention centers. They want to have them. They believe that business will come back once we've solved this problem, once we have a vaccine, once it's effective, once people don't fear traveling or going to meetings or to hotels. So that part of it, but besides hotels, which we're best known for, we're probably second best known for doing performing arts centers. And who the hell's going to performing arts right now?
Right.
No one.
Right.
We're getting ready to open a $150 million facility in January, and knowing that people will be coming when they're ready to come back. So, and look, I mean, we do criminal justice. We do schools. We do parking garages. I built a great parking garage up in New Jersey for St. Joseph's Hospital a couple of years ago. So, having a diversified organization that can move into different areas when you need to, I think is important. But we've not been hurt at this moment by COVID, thank goodness, and I'm knocking like crazy on my wooden desk. These cities have restricted revenues now. Their sales tax revenues are way down. Hell, even probably their ad valorem taxes are going to be taking a hit because of reevaluations of many, many properties. But it'll recover, and I think the key is to stay through. So I'm more of an optimist than I am a pessimist.
Ray, you're telling a great story about keeping your powder dry and staying on your toes and being ready for what comes. I would agree with you that things are certainly going to get better than they are now. But I also wonder if we're gonna come out of this a little changed, right? Meaning that maybe we're going to spend less time at convention centers now that we've discovered things like Zoom, right? So the question in my mind is whether, as you look at the various sectors of your business, you must be thinking something along the lines of, well, it's impossible to duplicate the experience of a performing arts hall on Zoom, but a convention center, you can kind of get around that, and right. So there's some parts of your business I would think that may wind up being more permanently affected than others as a consequence of COVID. And I wonder if you've got any insights to share there.
Well, maybe one of the good things is that I'm not getting hired to build, $400 and $500 million convention centers, the huge ones, and you're probably right about that. Those are going to probably be more affected. Some of these smaller convention centers that we're building, 20, 30,000 square feet, 12, 15,000 square foot ballroom. They want to have a couple of major municipal meetings in these ballrooms each year. But corporations within those cities have events, et cetera. We think that the smaller ones are going to be more agile and perform better in the short term, beginning. I think the meeting business is going to be the last to come back. I think tourism, transient business is going to be there. Business, travel, and so forth is going to be there next. And then the meeting business will come back. And that's why we don't think we'll see a return to maybe 2019 levels in the hotel business until probably 2024. That's
all right. Fair enough.
And I do think you're right. I think that when we built the Durham Performing Arts Center, which is one of the best performing arts centers in the country, there hadn't been a quarter since we opened it about 9 years ago that they haven't been in the top 5 in the nation of in terms of ticket sales and performances. We just did the Utah Performing Arts Center in downtown Salt Lake, the Echoes Theater there. And of course, the Buddy Holly is going to be, believe it or not, in Lubbock, Texas, is going to be probably one of the most acoustically perfect venues that we've seen built in the nation. But it serves Texas Tech University. It serves the Lubbock Independent School District, the opera, the symphony. Everyone bought into that particular venue, and it's going to have a bistro run by the largest food distributor in that entire part of Texas. So it'll be a place where people just want to go and have dinner and
Sounds great.
see something see some great art on the wall and think about Buddy Holly. So,
Ray, you gonna have a line on tickets for that Buddy Holly venue?
I can get you into the grand opening.
Outstanding. That sounds like a lot of fun. All right. Well, Ray, thank you so much for coming to join us and telling your story, sir. And let's everybody, let's see if we can network Ray around and find him good connections. I know you said you're looking for obviously connections to partners in government and construction and whatnot, but you did mention that before long you're going to be looking to hire a couple of people. Can you give us a moment and tell us what sorts of people you're looking for?
Well, in two areas primarily right now, we're really going to look for a really sharp analyst, but probably somebody with at least 5 years of doing analytical experience in this business. Helping us run all of the financial models and everything that we do with these projects. And then we are going to want another pretty senior, not real senior, but let's just say at least 5 years or so in construction management. Navy CV, Army Corps of Engineers, absolutely.
We got a couple of those running around. We might be able to help you out there. Nice.
So I'm thinking, because we've got projects here, we're going to probably break ground on at least 4 projects next year. And we typically have construction managers on each of those projects. And, anyway, those are 2 things that just jump right out in my mind immediately early next year.
Fair enough. We will keep that in mind and mention that in the newsletter, and let's see if we can find something for you.